All right, buckle up, because you won't believe what my sister, let's call her Ruby, and I started noticing across the street. Every single woman who left our enigmatic neighbor's place looked utterly spellbound, like they'd just stepped out of a dream. Of course, our curiosity went into overdrive. So one fateful evening, we decided to march right over and introduce ourselves. The moment the door swung open, we knew we weren't exactly unexpected. Before we dive in, if you're vibing with this kind of story, a quick thumbs up and a subscribe would be awesome. It's the easiest way to show some love, and I truly appreciate you being here. Let's get back to it. The night was winding down, and I was just about to head up to bed when a flicker of movement from across the street snagged my attention. His bedroom light, our mysterious neighbor's, blazed to life, and he definitely wasn't alone. I froze on the stairs, my hand still gripping the banister. A woman stood by the window, already shedding her dress like it was a routine, the fabric whispering down her shoulders. She leaned into him, her hands finding purchase on his chest, while he remained still, a serene calm radiating off him like he had all the time in the world. "Lena," I hissed, my voice low but urgent. "You have got to see this." Lena shuffled in, a blanket clutched around her sleep-tousled hair, dragged from the depths of the sofa. "What is it?" she mumbled, still half asleep. I just pointed, not daring to take my eyes off the scene unfolding across the street. "He's doing it again," I breathed. "Maya? Seriously?" She sighed, but even she couldn't resist a peek. The moment her eyes landed on the window, they widened in disbelief. Through the glass, the whole tableau was on display. Her back was now pressed against the wall, his hand a steady brace beside her head. He leaned in, murmuring something that made her laugh, a soft, breathy sound that quickly faded as he slowly traced the curve of her thigh, guiding her closer. Lena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "We shouldn't be watching this." "And yet," I said, a grin spreading across my face, "we are." We remained glued to the window, two shadows pressed close, like teenagers caught in the thrill of something forbidden. His movements were fluid, practiced, as if he'd played this scene countless times. Her reactions, however, were anything but routine. She clung to him, her head falling back, her legs trembling even before he shifted her. When he finally turned her towards the window, she gripped the frame like it was the only anchor in her world. Lena shifted beside me. "Is that the same woman from last week?" "Nope," I replied, keeping my gaze fixed. "Fresh face, maybe the 5th, 6th this month?" Lena shook her head, a mixture of disbelief and fascination in her eyes. "That's insane. I'm telling you," I whispered, my voice laced with intrigue. "They arrive all smiles, confident, even flirty, and they leave looking like they've experienced something earth-shattering, something they'll never quite forget." We watched as the woman across the street tensed again, her mouth falling slightly open, her eyes fluttering closed. He barely moved, but whatever he was doing had her clinging to him, her entire body a symphony of reaction. Lena finally turned away, a flush creeping up her neck. "Okay, that's enough." I didn't budge. "You can't tell me you're not even a little bit curious?" She sank onto the armrest, clutching her blanket tighter. "I mean, he is kind of impressive." "Kind of?" I echoed. "That man is a walking enigma. Mid-50s, barely utters a word, never boasts, and yet somehow has every woman in this neighborhood leaving his place as if they've just wandered out of a dream." Lena bit her lip, her gaze flicking back towards the window almost involuntarily. I smirked. "I want to know what that's like." She laughed nervously. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," I confirmed. "Not tonight," I added, "but tomorrow? Tomorrow I might just wander over there, say hello, introduce myself." "You're going to what? Knock on his door and ask for a sample?" "Maybe I'll borrow some sugar," I said, grinning, "or ask if he needs a hand carrying something heavy. Whatever works." Lena stood up, the blanket still clutched tightly. "You're completely out of your mind." "I know," I said, a playful glint in my eyes. "But admit it, you're wondering too." She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter around herself and looked away, a storm of conflicting emotions brewing on her face. The next morning, he was the first and only thought that snagged in my mind. Not a sliver of guilt lingered from our late-night surveillance. If anything, my curiosity had only intensified. What was his secret? What was it about him that left every woman so utterly spellbound? Lena, on the other hand, was putting on a masterful performance of nonchalance, as if the previous night hadn't burned itself into her brain. She was still cocooned on the couch in her pajamas, a bowl of cereal perched precariously on her lap, acting like it was just another ordinary morning. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a casual tone in my voice that didn't quite reach my eyes. "So," I began, "I'm thinking now might be a good time." She didn't even look up from her cereal. "Good time for what?" "You know," I said, a hint of a smile playing on my lips. She sighed, already bracing herself. "You were serious. Completely serious." "Absolutely, Lena," I confirmed, grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. "Maya," she groaned, finally looking up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You cannot just knock on some strange man's door because you liked what you saw through his window." "First of all," I said, my voice firm, "it's not just what I saw, it's what I've seen repeatedly, consistently. Last night was just the undeniable evidence." Lena burrowed deeper into the blanket, pulling it over her head like a shield. "I'm not going." "You don't have to do anything," I reassured her. "Just come with me. Be my backup. Maybe pretend I'm borrowing something." She peeked out from under the blanket, her expression a mixture of apprehension and reluctant curiosity. "Why do you even want me there?" "Because," I said, walking over to the couch, "you'll either keep me from doing something too bold, or you'll pressure me into doing something stupid." "Possibly," I added with a grin. "But either way, it'll be fun." She rolled her eyes, but I could see the resolve in her posture softening. When she finally stood, arms crossed tight, I tossed her a hoodie. A few minutes later, we were crossing the street, my heart thudding with something that wasn't quite nerves, more like pure anticipation. Lena trailed a step behind me the whole way, a picture of reluctant support. I knocked once. The door creaked open almost instantly, revealing him standing there. Barefoot, his shirt halfway buttoned, hair still damp from a recent shower. And the way he looked at us, it was like he'd been expecting us, like he'd known exactly who we were, and was simply waiting for us to finally make our move. His gaze flickered once from me to Lena, then back again, calm and measured, as if this was an inevitable encounter. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light and casual. "Sorry to just show up. We were out for a walk and figured we might as well say hi." Lena stood just behind me, arms crossed, the hoodie pulled tight as if she wished she could disappear into it. He nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement. "Nice of you to stop by." "I'm Maya," I offered, "and this is Lena. We live across the street." "I know," was all he said, his voice a low, smooth rumble. Nothing more, but the way he said it made it clear he hadn't bought our flimsy excuse, and he didn't need to. He simply stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter. We walked into a house filled with a soft, warm light and the lingering aroma of coffee. Music played softly in the background, a slow, mellow tune that sounded like it had been looping for hours. On the counter, 2 glasses sat, one already filled with a clear liquid. I raised an eyebrow, a silent question. "Expecting someone?" I asked. "Not really," he replied, his gaze steady. "Just figured I might have company." I shot Lena a quick look. She pretended to be absorbed by the framed art on the wall. He handed me the filled glass. I took it without hesitation, the cool glass a stark contrast to the sudden heat that flared within me. Lena hovered near the door, still uncertain, still quiet. "You're not what I pictured," I said, taking a small sip of the drink. It was surprisingly smooth, with a hint of citrus. "Neither are you," he countered, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. I smirked. "And what did you picture?" His tone remained even, unruffled. "People who watch that closely usually avoid eye contact the next day." Lena visibly flinched at his directness. "I didn't watch," I protested, though the heat rising in my cheeks betrayed me. "It's a window," he said simply, his eyes meeting mine without a hint of accusation. "Not a one-way mirror." I laughed, a quiet, sharp sound that held a nervous edge. "Fair enough." He dropped onto the edge of the plush couch like it was the most natural thing in the world, his arms resting casually on his knees. Lena still hadn't moved from her spot near the door. "You can go anytime, Lena," he said gently, his gaze flicking towards her. "No pressure." She didn't respond, her eyes darting between him and me, a silent battle raging within her. I leaned against the back of the couch, facing him directly. "You must get a lot of fake excuses at your door." He looked up at me, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips, calm and sure. I leave the window open for a reason. I didn't back away. Instead, I closed the distance between us, leaning against him, one leg draped casually across his lap, my fingers resting lightly on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just let his hand settle on my thigh, a warm, possessive weight that sent a shiver down my spine. It felt expected. Lena's voice cut through the quiet tension in the room. "You're actually doing this." I glanced over at her, still rooted near the door. "You act like I dragged you here." "You kind of did," she mumbled, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else. "Curiosity?" "Then go," I said simply, my gaze returning to him. "Or stay and admit you're not just here for me." She shook her head vehemently. "He's a stranger, Maya." "No," I corrected her, my voice low and intense. "He's the man who's had every woman in this neighborhood leaving his house like they forgot what year it was, including the one we watched last night." He raised an eyebrow, just slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I try to make sure they don't forget me." Lena flinched at his words, but her eyes remained locked on his, a strange sort of magnetic pull keeping her rooted to the spot. I stood up slowly, walked over to her, and took her hand. She froze, her pulse a frantic flutter beneath my fingertips. "You don't have to do anything, Lena," I said quietly, my eyes meeting hers. "But don't lie to yourself either." Then, I gently guided her forward, step by step, right in front of him. He looked up at her, his expression calm, steady, unreadable. Then, he leaned in and kissed her. Lena let out a shaky breath when his mouth touched hers, a hesitant, almost surprised sound. But after a fleeting heartbeat, she pulled back, her face flushed, her eyes wide and uncertain. I didn't hesitate. I stepped in, brushing past her, and kissed him with full intent. No guessing, no pause. I made it clear what I wanted. His hands moved to my hips, steady and deliberate, a silent invitation. When I leaned back, neither of us spoke. I reached for the hem of my dress, and he mirrored my action. They slipped to the floor, like it wasn't the first time we'd done this, not with each other, perhaps, but with someone. Then I moved closer, my hands still resting on his shoulders, feeling the heat radiating off his skin. His breathing shifted, becoming a little quicker, a little shallower. I took my time, tracking every subtle change in his body, the way his shoulders tightened, how his grip tensed almost imperceptibly against the cushion. I wanted to feel everything he was holding back. Behind me, something shifted. He looked past me and offered a hand. Lena stood there, still clutching her dress like a shield, hovering between stepping forward and retreating out the door. He didn't say a word, just offered that silent invitation. Lena moved towards us, slow, cautious, but not resisting. He kissed her again, softly this time, a tender exploration that seemed to melt some of the tension in her shoulders. His hand slid behind her neck, grounding her, while his other hand gently eased the dress from her trembling fingers. It dropped to the floor without a sound, and her breath hitched in her throat. I kept going, letting the unspoken rhythm guide me. Lena joined me on the floor, still hesitant until he reached out and touched her cheek, guiding her with a calm certainty that seemed to soothe her unease. Our hands brushed briefly, a silent acknowledgement, both of us focused on the same magnetic pull. She was slower, more tentative, but growing bolder with each shared breath, each stolen glance. When his head tipped back slightly, a silent invitation, I knew we were making progress. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady, a quiet command that sent a thrill through me. "Both of you?" Up. We stood together, a silent understanding passing between us. He slid further back onto the couch, his arms resting wide, an open invitation. I climbed onto the cushions, straddling him slowly, shifting until I was exactly where I needed to be. The moment his lips met my skin, a jolt of pure sensation shot through me, and my grip tightened on his shoulders. His movements were deliberate, focused, unrushed, endlessly skilled. I tilted my head back, breathing through the building intensity. Lena lowered herself again, and I glanced down as she picked up where I'd left off, her hands finding their own rhythm, growing more confident as I guided her gently with a touch of my hand on her back. We moved together, a shared purpose binding us. His attention didn't falter, every motion building on the last, sending waves of sensation through my legs, tightening everything within me. My balance wavered, but I didn't want him to stop, not when he was this close to unraveling me. Then, Lena inhaled sharply, a small sound of surrender. He touched her, a gentle encouragement, urging her up. She stood and let him guide her onto his lap, his hands steadying her at the waist. I stepped back, brushing a hand along her spine as she settled above him. She closed her eyes and let gravity do the rest, her breath catching in her throat. She shifted slowly, adjusting with each subtle motion, his hands a firm support at her back and hips. Her breath turned uneven, her focus locked on him. She leaned in, gripping his shoulders for balance as her movements grew stronger, more insistent. Then her body tensed, her head falling against his, her back arching just enough to show us everything we needed to know. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He held her for a long moment, then stood with her in his arms and carried her to the nearby cushions, lowering her with exquisite care. Then he turned to me. I was already ready, facing away, my breath already shallow with anticipation. He stepped behind me and took hold, guiding us into a rhythm that took over without hesitation. His hands were sure, his pace steady but firm. Lena lay nearby, watching through half-closed eyes, still catching her breath. I smiled at her, a silent acknowledgement of the shared experience. Then the pressure shifted, intensified, and I gasped, grabbing at the couch for balance. Every second pulled me deeper into the sensation, a spiraling descent. He knew exactly where to go, how to keep me right on the edge. When he angled just right, my back arched, and everything inside surged forward, a wave of pure release that shook through me. I leaned forward, eyes shut, barely held together by the relentless pace he maintained. Steady, still he didn't slow down. If anything, he was just getting started. He turned to Lena, gently lifting her once again, and laid her flat beside me. She barely had a second to recover before he joined her, his movements now imbued with an even more urgent intensity. I knelt beside them, wiping the sheen of sweat from her brow, trailing light kisses along his shoulder and chest. Lena's hand searched for mine, and I held it tight, a silent bond forged in shared experience. She moved with him again, faster this time, her body responding easily, rising to meet his. She gripped the cushions, her breathing ragged, her reactions growing stronger with each building moment. I watched her closely, amazed by the raw intensity of her response. He kept going, focused, fierce, somehow tireless. His stamina didn't just impress, it overwhelmed. It felt like he could keep going forever, and a part of me believed he might. At last, he let out a quiet breath against her neck as he reached his limit, a soft sound of completion. Lena lay completely still, her chest heaving, her face flushed and serene. I curled up beside them, brushing strands of damp hair from her forehead, my own body still humming with the aftershocks. Then I leaned closer and whispered, a playful grin still lingering on my lips. Still think it was a bad idea? Before you go, tell me, if two sisters showed up at your door like that, what would you have done? Be honest, drop it in the comments. And while you're here, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.